Nerdrotic.com.
Now that we're 6 episodes into the abomination from Amazon known as the Rings of Power, I have to ask you all collectively out there, what have we learned? For me, after weeks of watching She-Hulk and the Rings of Power, found out my sobriety is strong. As far as what we have all learned as a group is concerned, well, I think the answer is obvious. Hollywood is filled with talentless, woke, ideological, repurposing hacks who are high on either actual drugs or as high as Hunter S. Thompson and William S. Burroughs during a weekend in Vegas on their own farts. Particularly after this episode, I think all of us, all 550,000 of you, and the 43% that hasn't subscribed yet, thank you, can come to an agreement on a couple of things. First, no more prequels. For every Better Call Saul, we get 100 Rings of Power. I do not need to see how Jaws was conceived and find out later that it was just an environmental tale on man's impact on nature.
How dare you!
And we definitely didn't need an origin of Mithril or Mount Doom and Mordor. Apparently, all it takes to start a volcano is add water. Over on D+ right now, we have Andor, a show I'm no longer watching, which is technically a prequel to a prequel that's a sequel to some prequels. I blame you, George Lucas! We're even getting prequels in currently running TV series and currently running cinematic universes, like Doctor Who removing William Hartnell as the first Doctor and turning him into a little black girl, or Captain Marvel naming the Avengers after her test plane, and Nick Fury losing his eye to a kitty cat. And yes, I know I'm enjoying a prequel right now of sorts, House of the Dragon. I would gladly give that up for no more prequels. But I think we can all agree in this growing fellowship of men and women who are tired of all this woke ideological nonsense that this might be the most creatively bankrupt, repurposed shit we've ever seen. It defines the era of corporate garbage. And the Rings of Power is just dumb. Oh yeah, take that, haters. Rings of Power was #1 with 1.2 billion minutes viewed. Oh, we'll get to that, but I'm guessing any headlines that praise this are going to age about as well as these headlines. From BuzzFeed, Amazon's Lord of the Rings series is absolutely stunning and puts House of the Dragon to shame. From The Guardian, the Rings of Power review, so astounding it makes House of the Dragon look amateur. With episode 6, I got some good news and I've got some bad news. We'll start with the good news. No Harfoots, no Doogie Elrond and Durin. The bad news? Lots and lots of warrior Galadriel, the Girl-Barian warrior of the wasteland, scourge of the orcs and commander of the northern armies. And credit where credit is due, the showrunners did manage to make the battle scenes cringe and boring. Ultimately, I think they did go all Game of Thrones on us as we start out the episode with Adar talking to his children, the brothers and the sisters.
Yet before this night is through, some of us will fall. But as brothers and sisters in our home.
Anybody bring any extra bags?
No, nobody brought an extra bag.
I'll let your imagination do the rest. This question is for all the women out there, and by the way, today I identify as a biologist. Do you feel seen in this crowd of orcs? Adar and his very white orcs want to make evil great again, I guess that would be mega, and they're going to do it by taking the Southlands in a scene that's totally not supposed to remind us of Helm's Deep. General Bronwyn and her male assistant Don Lemonless came up with the master plan of loosening every stone in the tower, so much so that all it would take is a single wooden beam to knock it down. How did they do this in essentially an evening? I don't know. That did admittedly kill some orcs, all to sacrifice their fortified position to go fight in a sparsely populated village filled with hovels and homes with wooden and thatched roofs.
Which is retarded.
But that's the kind of strategy you're going to get when you decide to make Summer Moonbeam, who runs the holistic medicine and CBD shop in Sunnyvale, your battle commander.
This is to be our keep, our fallback point. To your positions.
Remember when we spent 2 entire episodes with Galadriel trying to convince Halbrand and girl boss Muriel to sail to Middle-earth to fight for the Southlands? Then it took them about 10 minutes to sail there. Again, this is signature bad reboot disciple storytelling. They have no concept of time and distance. Just ask any Star Trek fan. But Elendil finally tells us what happened to Isildur's mother when Galadriel asks.
His mother. What happened to her?
She drowned. And the sea is always right.
That's some cold
Listen, I know you only had $1 billion, and admittedly, you got a couple of CGI scenes right, but Look at this costuming. Look at this moob armor. Here is a great example of repurposing hackery. We have Don Lemonless here trying to destroy the MacGuffin, the sword hilt, which is a stand-in for the ring. But if that isn't enough for you, they have repurposed dialogue.
It is beyond our skill to destroy.
The ring cannot be destroyed, Gimli, son of Gloin, by any craft that we here possess.
Now, during the town meeting, we get another girl boss moment, and then this genius statement was made.
Our position gives us an advantage.
You know, it is like the actual Don Lemon and some cannabis dispensary owner from Marin came up with the battle plan for this town. Remember, they gave up their fortified watchtower, admittedly poorly put together by elves, to hide out in a tavern with a wooden roof. A tavern that is for the wounded and the children.
Tavern.
Taverns for wounded and children. I can fight.
I challenge any Tolkien expert or scholar to argue for that line sounding Tolkienian. Do you think something like that would come out of his mind or mouth? He would gouge your eyes out with his pipe just for attaching his name to this. Why do you think women stay behind with children? Because they're weaker? No, someone needs to take care of the children. But ladies, you have achieved equality. Now you're as disposable as men. Do you feel seen? But that's the biggest difference between writers today and writers of a now bygone era. The writers of today's whole experience is watching other people's films and TV shows, and the writers of the bygone era, for example, J.R.R. Tolkien, fought and survived in a world war, managed to raise a family, become a professor, and write a couple of books by hand. Some of the most accessible stories of all time. This Battle of Balls Deep is just ridiculous, and yes, I stole that from Az. It happens in a magically reconstructed town from 2 episodes ago where it was burning, again with thatched and wooden roofs. And their weapon of choice? Fire! They trapped the very white orcs in a very similar scenario to Obi-Wan not being able to get around that fence. All this was to set up the big twist that they were actually fighting their own. The men and women, the very diverse men and women who split off from the group because they weren't inspired by Girl Boss's speech. Allegory was a little subtle, so I'll just explain it to you like they do in the show for everything. The very white orcs were fighting with men and women who were fighting their own, like a civil war. I'm surprised they didn't say the South will rise again. Then in a scene that's totally not supposed to remind us of Aragorn fighting the Uruk-hai at the end of Fellowship of the Ring, we had Don Lemonless versus a big orc. Big difference here is he's saved by Bronwyn, but to be honest, if Fellowship was made today, Aragorn would have been saved by Arwen. That's now 3 confirmed orc kills for Girl Boss Bronwyn.
Slay!
After Don Lemonless and Girl Boss Bronwyn realize that they have been fighting their own, they decide to retreat into the tavern, but it's too late, and Bronwyn gets shot twice by arrows. Then everybody involved in this show must have forgot she got shot by 2 arrows, as we get a prolonged scene of them removing just one. Adar finally breaks into the tavern, kills a couple of people, and Theo finally gives up the MacGuffin. And then we get some more repurposed dialogue.
Why sacrifice their lives for such a little thing?
Strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt over so small a thing.
Now, I did predict this scene quite some time ago before anybody knew anything about this show, but it was in jest and I didn't get it completely right. Warrior Galadriel leading Númenóreans. Not going to be surprised at all to see diverse elves, inclusive dwarves, representative hobbits, an all-female legion of Númenórean warriors led by the warrior Galadriel in full body armor, cutting through orcs and goblins like they're butter. Yeah, I know, Nerdstradamus. Now, the next scene, we have Adar or Adar and some obvious ADR. See what I did there?
Waldreg, I have a task for you.
It's almost like they think the audience has the room temperature IQ of, I don't know, the Rings of Power writer's room. Adar or Adar handed Methrendil his package, hey now, with the sword hilt, and obviously we're going to have to keep this in mind because, well, more than one person completely forgets to do something really important. We get Deus Ex Númenóreans led by, of course, warrior Galadriel, and this battle is just an absolute mess. We have side-saddling Galadriel not once, but twice, but in this first interaction, she's not anywhere near this orc that just explodes when she swings her sword 5 feet away from him. Of course, the moob armor is on display, and what the hell is going on with Elendil's helmet? And compare this to the Elendil from The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, that came out 20 years ago. Then Galadriel, the girl Barian, and Halbrand, pursue Adar and his package, and quite frankly, this fits in with Amazon. They would know a lot about stolen and lost packages. Halbrand trips Adar's horse, and hey, at least the director was nice enough to show that the horsey was okay. I mean, never mind all the people getting gutted and decapitated. Then we get some more cringe dialogue. Now, earlier in the episode, Galadriel lectured Isildur on humility.
Despise not the labor which humbles the heart. Humility has saved entire kingdoms, the proud have all but led to ruin.
Bitch, are you for real?
Like she would know a thing about that. And then we get this nugget of Tolkienian dialogue.
One cannot satisfy thirst by drinking seawater.
Is she actually semi-lecturing Halbrand about revenge, the same woman who admitted last episode she's on a revenge quest? This leads to the interrogation scene between Galadriel, who's going all Charlie Bronson, on Adar, and you will notice that Adar is almost as tall as Galadriel sitting down. And this entire scene is an absolute desecration of Tolkien. They use the word Moriandor, which is made up for the show. Adar is made up for the show, and they extrapolate on the possible origins of the orcs. It's believed that Morgoth twisted men and elves into a mockery of life that would be the orc, something purely evil, and that's exactly what Tolkien intended. It didn't need any extrapolation from hacks. We also don't need Galadriel threatening to torture the orcs to get information out of them. This is followed by something even worse, the Galadriel Halbrand shipping scene.
Fighting at your side, I felt if I could just hold on to that feeling.
If they weren't interrupted, I'm pretty sure they were going to make out. Galadriel and Sauron. And I'm not sorry, that's Sauron. And right on cue, there is a hashtag Halbrandriel. It should be Saurondriel. This show was written by a marketing department full of people who skated through high school, made it to university, and they got multiple degrees in insert here studies.
You know, morons.
Speaking of morons, the Southerners just accept Halbrand as their king. I guess the Southern vetting process isn't as thorough as, say, Gondor's was. We know that Aragorn has a known lineage and was raised in Rivendell, and Halbrand just ran across Galadriel in the middle of the ocean. Now remember, Galadriel pursued Adar to get a package, which she did get, but she never bothered to open. Then she passed it off to Don Lemelnus, who didn't bother to open it then. Then he passes it for some reason to Theo, who admits he misses it the same way that Bilbo was gonna miss the ring, and of course they repurposed the dialogue.
When it was in my hands, I felt powerful.
Then rid yourself of it.
Trust me, as you once did. Let it go.
Considering this is dark magic, I have no idea why Don Lemonless gave it back to Theo, but I also have no idea why nobody bothered to check the package. Hey now. Turns out it was just an axe, and Mithrandir went back to the town while everybody was dicking around, and he decided to put the sword hilt key into the lock. But before we get to that, and if I miss anything, feel free to put it in the comments section below. Let's go to Adar's big plan. First, dig big trenches, dig small tunnels, not get noticed by the keen-eyed elves.
Keen to the eyes of the elves.
A big-ass trench!
Count on High Regional Manager Gilgalad to cancel war and call all the elves back from that watchtower. Then capture those elves, hope they escape so you can kill most of them except for one, so you can send him back with all his weapons to send a message. All while Adar and his very white orcs look for a sword hilt. How do they know about this sword hilt? I don't know. Then ultimately get defeated by the Southerners and the Deus Ex Numenorians, led by warrior Galadriel, and then count on Galadriel and Don Lemonless to not open that package that you obviously switched into the last possible moment for dramatic effect. So Mithrandir can turn the lock, which opens up a spillway from a dam that just so happens to fill up all of the trenches and holes that you dug to start a volcano. Also, you can block out the sun for your 5 orcs that are left. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is your very dumb origin of Mount Doom. And no, that amount of water couldn't have started the volcano because the chamber wasn't pressurized. Still, the volcano explodes. Adar escapes. By the way, he knows Halbrand is Sauron too. And the town and Galadriel get hit by a pyroclastic flow that no elf or human would survive. They're not Superman. And this is the episode that IGN called 10 out of 10. A masterpiece. This episode was beyond dumb. It was a travesty. It was a crime against imagination. The desolation of Tolkien, who's spinning like a turbine in his grave right now. But Rings of Power was #1 in the Nielsen's, and it totally beat House of the Dragon, except it didn't.
Okay, let's look at a chart.
Top 10 streaming programs, The Rings of Power, with 2 episodes, 1.2 billion minutes viewed. No, they do not measure by viewers. That will come up later. And House of the Dragon is #5 with 3 episodes, technically 2, with 781 million minutes, finishing just behind Game of Thrones. Strange that a #5 show would cause an older show to reach #3. Something to think about. On the second chart here for streaming originals, you'll see Rings of Power is #1 again, and Stranger Things is #3. We'll get back to that. That was from Variety, and they neglected to mention what The Hollywood Reporter mentions here, and it's the real story about these ratings. Nielsen Reach figures a measure of people who watched at least 6 minutes of a given program for House of the Dragon and The Rings of Power are somewhat similar. The Rings of Power holds an edge among streaming viewers only, with 12.6 million people in the United States of America checking out the series over its first 4 days, compared to 10.6 million for the House of the Dragon. Adding in viewing of the latter on HBO's main cable channel, however, brings the total for House of the Dragon to 14.5 million on-demand viewers, and those who watch on HBO's multiplex channels aren't counted. In other words, this is all bullshit. By the way, any of these streaming services could come out with the real numbers. Here on YouTube, which houses more content than any of those streaming services combined, we as individuals can look at analytics for our own video, and we can practically tell you what you are eating while you are watching our videos. And to be fair, HBO just got busted fudging their numbers, and I got news for you. Every streaming service is fudging their numbers. Maybe it has something to do with this. High anxiety in Hollywood. Everyone is totally drained and burnt out. That tends to happen after you alienate half of your customers. And this is right in line with what Amazon did with The Rings of Power. Just trust your eyes and your ears. Does this feel like a success? Does it feel like a hit with all those massive ratios, the low Metacritic score, the low Rotten Tomatoes scores, the very suspect IMDb score, the removal of reviews on Prime Video? Of course not. In closing, I was told by somebody who may or may not work with Amazon that this couldn't be just a mild hit. It had to be a massive hit. As big a hit as Stranger Things. So we'll see if The Rings of Power is on any of these charts in a few months. I'll just go out on a limb right now and say it won't be, and I'll make another prediction. Metaphorically, heads are gonna roll, and you are winning. If you like what you heard, please like, share, and subscribe. If you didn't like what you heard, I thank you for listening this long. I'll see you in the next video.
Nerdrotic.com.
Cast it into the fire! Destroy it!